stuck between a libertarian and a Republican. Welcome to Belated Podcast.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is Ronald Johnson, Publitarian, coming at you again with another episode of Publitarian Podcast. Yes, I have returned. We are up to episode number 51 now, and I have been slacking in the podcast department. On a personal note, we've been stuck between we're moving, we're not moving, the studio's together, the studio's not together, and I said, you know what, I really need to sit down and get a podcast recorded for my faithful listeners. I've actually heard from some of my faithful listeners asking when a new episode was coming out, and I do appreciate that. So here we go, episode number 51. I had a 4th of July episode planned. I was going to make a big America episode, and now we're kind of a week behind doing that. So obviously, I'm going to give a shout out to the greatest country in the history of human civilization. So take it away, Mr. Announcer Guy.
A week late, but never a bad time to celebrate the greatest country in the world. Moving Western civilization forward for 243 years. Feeding, clothing, and protecting the world. A country so great that even the people that hate it don't want to leave it. Let's hear it for the United States of America.
That's right. 243 years of kicking ass. We love this country. We wouldn't live anywhere else, despite its faults. I love seeing the women's soccer team doing the tea drinking emote while they're winning. That's pretty badass. No, I'm not going to spend any time talking about the beta cuck female that has a problem with Trump or the country or the flag. She's not worth my time. But since one of the reasons that we fought for independence was because of taxes, I heard this great analogy about taxation that I thought I would open up with in the spirit of our independence from Great Britain. To think that we went to war about taxation without representation over a 3% tax on tea, and now that we surrender so much of our freedom and so much of our tax willingly to the federal government, that part's a little bit of a Debbie Downer for today, even though I'm celebrating America, but the analogy was so great that I had to pass it on. I've been listening to this radio host slash podcaster for years, an old curmudgeon by the name of Neil Boortz, Nealboortz. If you've never heard of him, he's actually been doing talk radio, conservative talk radio, libertarian talk radio longer than the Godfather Limbaugh. He's been around forever. He retired back in 2012, and he just started doing a podcast, and he said something that struck a chord with me, and I had to take that Tier 3 podcast and pass it along to my Tier 1 podcast listeners. He said, America isn't free. It's a tax farm. America is a tax farm, and you are free-range livestock being milked for your tax money. And it sent shivers down my spine. And I was like, wow, we have this illusion of freedom. But my own phrase that I've coined was, we don't really live in the land of the free. We live in the land of slightly less restrictions than most. And as time marches on, it seems like those freedoms are slowly starting to be stripped away and eroded. And a lot of it is because people on the right just want to get along. We just want to live our life. A lot of us don't even want to be political. We just want to go and do our jobs and be left alone. Unfortunately, that has been our downfall as well, because people on our side of the aisle haven't been paying attention, and we've been reactionary to this warfare for 40 years. I'm saying it ad nauseum that we're 40 years too late to the culture war. Andrew Breitbart said politics is downstream of culture, and we have lost this culture war for so long because we're reactionary. We're not proactive about it. And it hurts my heart to see the greatest country in the world suffer this fate. And we have a path that we're at right now. We're at two paths that are going to fork off and go one way or the other. They're going to diverge, converge. Was it diverge? Yeah, diverge. Well, if you're British, you say diverge. I don't know. Diverge. Diverge? One is we are at the end of our lifespan because free societies, if you look throughout history, only have a certain amount of years before they get, God, I don't want to say too free, but yeah, they get too free, too complacent, and they're destroyed from within. And the other path is we can take the path that we did in the 60s where we squashed it back. The problem in the 60s, we squashed this liberal communist Marxist thing back, but we didn't pull it up by the roots. We just squashed it back. And then they just slowly started getting into culture and big shoe into education. And so we are still fighting this battle where we're chopping down weeds and the weeds are growing faster than we can chop them down. And the solution to that is start being proactive, start producing more. It doesn't even have to be conservative content. It can just be content that's not SJW liberal. That's one of the reasons why Fox News was so popular. It wasn't even that they were conservative. They were just not the other guys. Dan Bongino's talked about that before. And I think if we start producing art, start producing content, start producing culture that just showcases what we're not, that would be a huge win in the battle. As usual, this is not in my podcast notes. This was just me free thinking, talking about America and freedom. And it really got me thinking right now, even just as I'm recording this podcast, that we're not as free as we think we are. And we need to get a handle on it and start being proactive to these battles. Because like it or not, we're going into an ideological civil war. I won't call it an actual civil war yet, but we're definitely in an ideological civil war, and the battle lines are starting to be more and more clearly drawn. And you're either on the side of freedom or you're on the side of Marxism, liberalism, and tyranny. And pretty soon there's not going to be any gray area anymore. And the left is pushing us that way. There are completely reasonable people that should be on the left that aren't, that are on the right now, just because the other side of the aisle is completely wackadoo and unreasonable. Speaking of wackadoo, how about an AOC update? Her new theme song on the show. I was actually torn whether to do circus music or the Russian national anthem, but I think circus music sometimes is more apropos for her. I know there are two camps with AOC. There are the camps of people that she does provide entertainment for, and then there are other people that are like, no, quit giving her attention, stop paying attention to her. No, like it or not, she's in the culture now. She's in the sphere. You do have to pay attention to her, and she does have a following. Even though she's a friggin' idiot, she's got a following. And she said something in a tweet this week that I felt like I needed to address. Here's what she said. Here was her tweet regarding Ivanka Trump and the G20 summit. It may be shocking to some, but being someone's daughter isn't like actually a career qualification. It hurts our diplomatic standing when the president phones it in and the world moves on. The U.S. needs our president working the G20. Bringing a qualified, diplomat couldn't hurt either. Of course, I'm paraphrasing there. So I guess you probably don't need me to point out the irony of that statement, that a bartender whose brother put her name in a hat for a casting call, who's now a United States representative, criticizing a woman who was the VP of the Trump organization that's worth, $50 million, and has been an advisor to the president and has spoke on these issues before. Not to mention the cherry on the top, that the president brought the first all-female leadership team to the G20 summit. All of these positives. And she's saying that the president's phoning it in and that Ivanka's not qualified. AOC's brother, not AOC, her brother put her name in a hat for a casting call. She answered a literal casting call to run for Congress. A casting call. And they're proud of it. They advertise for it. They are so proud of how they got her to Congress. So, you know what? I think I'll just leave that one where it is. I'm sure my audience is super capable of seeing the irony in that. And speaking of AOC, yet another AOC update. Her pictures of her crying at this fence of an empty parking lot of a border facility has gone viral, but for all the wrong reasons. She's doing this crocodile tears into the camera. Other photos have surfaced where it shows the photographers trying to get the angle just right. And yeah. So now, because I love the internet, the hashtag AOC challenge has come up, and people are taking pictures of themselves in front of fences and crying. One lady did it in front of a Home Depot fence. Another guy did it in front of a park he couldn't get into. And it's freaking hilarious. So I encourage all of you to take the AOC challenge and take yourself crying in front of a fence and let it go viral and let the chips fall. So anyway, that is our AOC update. Sorry to keep continuing to give her attention, but like I said, she's out there, she's in the sphere, and it needs to be addressed. The stupidity needs to be addressed. Also making headlines are companies getting woke. You've got Oreo tweeting about inclusivity, and you've got Nike bowing to Colin Kaepernick and taking the Betsy Ross flag off of their shoes. You know what? I don't know where this is heading, folks. We have liberalism and we've got corporate liberalism. Maybe I'll start calling it corporalism. That's a nice, fun word. I think we're at the point where we're at such an ideological divide that boycotts aren't going to work because these companies are already alienating half of potential customers that could be buying their product. But the message is more important now than the product. And the reason being is because liberals and elitists think that they are morally right. So if you think in your heart of hearts that you have the moral high ground, you're willing to suffer some slings and arrows to get your point across. So even if it hits them in the pocketbook, they're going to double down and triple down. Well, that's what liberals do anyway. Even if they're shown to be wrong, even if you hit them with the facts, they still double down and triple down. They'll just deflect, move around to another end, and come at the argument again with the same talking point, just spun differently. That's just how they operate. That's their MO. And that's what's happening with these companies. Target suffered a lot of losses when they made their transgender bathroom policy a thing. Their stock took a hit, and they don't care. They're staying the course. And that's what these companies are going to do. I'm not calling for boycotts of these companies. You do what you want to with your money. But conservatives do have a long memory, and we're going to remember this. Conservatives still remember like what Jane Fonda did in the 60s, where she went over to Vietnam and sat in a tank and hugged the Viet Cong soldiers and were like, these are good people. America's the bad guys. And that was how many decades ago? People still remember that, and there are people that still won't watch her movies because of it. So you are welcome to do with your money what you want, but I know that Nike, and I don't think I've been in a Target since then. I just can't believe that companies feel they need to inject themselves into politics now. Reason being, I think, this is just a theory that I have, is that we still haven't addressed the educational system and the admin state. There I go again with the admin state. I'm going to keep talking about that. The admin state pushing out people from these educational institutions that have been liberally brainwashed. And that comes from business school as well. So now what's happening, I think people are being educated that it is their moral duty and obligation to, yes, maybe make a profit, but to take the tremendous power of these businesses and engineer social change. And like I said, I don't have factual evidence to back that up. That is just my feeling of what is happening, because there couldn't be any other explanation that why businesses that have always been interested in turning a profit and within the past decade or so don't seem to be interested in the profit anymore. Or maybe they are interested in the profit and it just benefits them to get more profit from the other side of the aisle. One of those things is true. And a lot of the news of the day that I had in my notes that I was going to talk about is obviously almost a month old news now, so it's not even worth me addressing. You've probably heard all of the opinions that you need to hear on such news. But I will tell you something interesting that happened. I got an email from the White House, which I'm not anybody special. I'm sure it was just a mass email, but they were wanting to hear examples of me being censored on social media, which I was happy to provide. This has happened a lot on Instagram and Twitter. I'm sure you guys are aware of Laura Loomer and Milo Yiannopoulos and Gavin McInnes, Alex Jones, people that are on the right that have been totally like deplatformed and depersoned. Like Laura Loomer can't get an Uber. Like they've messed with their bank account. They've messed with their PayPal. And, the beer fridge is plugged in again, by the way. And there is beer in the beer fridge. We have a happy beer fridge. It just kicked on and reminded me about it. Anyway, so these things are really happening, and the White House is paying attention and wanting to hear stories of this, which I am taking comfort in because I've addressed this before. Red Pill America has addressed this before on their podcast. The internet is a free space. And if you are abdicating yourselves as an open platform, such as Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, any of these, if you're an open platform, then you need to be an open platform. If you are a publisher, which is what you really are, you need to be governed as such, and you need to be opened up to libel lawsuits and things that publishers have to be opened up to and to be governed as such. Because if not, you're having your cake and eat it too. You get to fall back on ambiguous terms and services that nobody ever defines, by the way. They just find out later that they have violated them somehow. So you either fall back on terms and services or you say, hey, no, we're an open platform. Well, you're not an open platform if you're censoring people. So some action needs to be taken. I've already talked about this before. I'm not sure what the action is. And I don't think anybody is, because the libertarian in me certainly doesn't want more government involvement in anything. But at the same time, something needs to be done because the people are being silenced. And that's very Orwellian, and it needs to stop. On a lighter note, I have to bring up my great state of Florida. This article is a month or two old, but I still wanted to share it. Florida man who allegedly slapped his girlfriend with cheeseburger and kicked her downstairs, charged with battery. Gosh, my frickin' state. Again, I will defend my state and say that it's not that people living in Florida are crazy. It's that the crazies move here because of the weather and the very low taxes. It's a very favorable state to move to. And the crazies gravitate here. Anyway, a Florida man was arrested this month after allegedly slapping his sleeping girlfriend in the face with a cheeseburger and then kicking her downstairs. Kyle Jamison Jones, 30, was charged with battery and taken to the Martin County Jail after the incident. The Martin County Sheriff's Office confirmed in a statement yesterday. Local media outlet WPLG reported the altercation occurred on May 4th, citing an arrest report. Police deputies were called to Jones' residence by his partner, who reported the cheeseburger attack and said that her boyfriend had also pulled her hair and kicked her down the stairs. A motive for the alleged attack was not immediately clear. Jones admitted to a verbal dispute but refused to say anything about becoming physical with the victim, police said. Officers noted the victim was visibly upset and covered with bits of food when they arrived at the home. Sorry for laughing at that. A statement by the department published to Facebook said Kyle Jamison Jones wanted it his way. When he didn't get it, things between him and his girlfriend escalated. Oh, and the beer fridge cut back off. And I think I will cut myself off as well. I've done enough damage for today. Again, sorry it took me so long to get an episode out. I hope I've got you caught up now into my world and my thinkings of what's going on in this great country of ours. Again, happy belated birthday to the United States of America. Hope you guys had a wonderful Independence Day. I'm sure you did. And then I will see you back sooner rather than later on the next episode of Publitarian Podcast. If you want to reach out to me, you can. You can DM me on Instagram, or you can email me at publitarian@gmail.com or thepublitarian@gmail.com. I'm on all of the social medias, Gab, Parlay, Twitter, you name it, I'm on there. Again, thank you so much for listening to the podcast, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.
You've been listening to Belated Podcast. Copyright 2019.